Parivrajakarja Stokha Shishi Bhati Stavankrecha Pai Chandra Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki, ISKCON BBD Founder Charya, save the whole world Srila Prabhupada ki, Jai Nityananda Vishnu Pada Paramahansa, Parivrajakarja Astotarasata Shri Srimad Stavankrecha Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj ki, Ananta Koti Vaishnava ki, Namacharya Shri Haridas Thakur ki, Prem Sakho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhara Sri Sadi Gaura Bhakta ki, Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gopavara, Shamakund Radha Kiri Govardhan ki, Brajavali Shri Damara Vidam Purusham Krishna Jagannath ki, Ganga Mai ki, Jamuna Mai ki, Bhakti Devi ki, Tulasi Maharani ki, Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda ki, Jai Nitai Gaur Premanandi, all glories to some glories, all glories to some glories, all glories to some glories, all glories, let us be to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Gravya Kriti Tvam Gunatam Dravya Kriti Tvam Gunatam Dravya Kriti Tvam Gunatam Vyakti Sangstatvam Eva Cha Vyakti Sangstatvam Cha Vyakti Sangstatvam Cha Dravya Kirti Tvam Gunatam Bhakti Samstatvam Cha Tejastvam Tejasa Sadvi Tejastvam Tejasa Sadvi Tejastvam Tejasa Sadvi Rupa Matrasya Vritaya Rupa Matrasya Vritaya Rupa Matrasya Vritaya Tejastvam Tejasa Sadvi Rupa Matrasya Vritaya Dravya Kritvam Punata Vyakti Sangstatvam Cha Tejastvam Tejasa Sadvi Rupa Matrasya Vritaya Dravya Kritvam Punata Vyakti Sangstatvam Cha Tejastvam Tejasa Sadvi Rupa Matrasya Vritaya Dravya of an object. Akriti tvam, dimension. Gunata, quality. Vyakti sangstatvam, individuality. Eva, also. Cha, and. Tejastvam, effulgence. Tejasa, of fire. Sadhvi, a virtuous lady. Rupa matrasya, the subtle element form. Sorry, of the subtle element form. Vritaya, the characteristics. Translation. My dear mother, the characteristics of form are understood by dimension, quality, and individuality. The form of fire is appreciated by its effulgence. Responsibly, please. My dear mother, the characteristics of form are understood by dimension, quality, and individuality. The form of fire is appreciated by its effulgence. For every form that we appreciate has its particular dimensions and characteristics. The quality of a particular object is appreciated by its utility, but the form of sound is independent. Forms which are invisible can only be understood. Forms which are invisible can be understood only by touch. Can someone think of a form which can be understood by touch, which is invisible? You're surrounded by it. Air. Can you feel the breeze moving through right now? It's air, but you can't perceive it because it's moving. You can feel it. Therefore you can perceive it. Forms which are invisible can be understood only by touch. That is the independent appreciation of a visible form. Visible forms are understood by analytical study of their constitution. The constitution of a certain object is appreciated by its internal action. For example, the form of salt is appreciated by interaction of salty tastes, and the form of sugar is appreciated by the interaction of sweet tastes. Tastes and qualitative constitution are the basic principles in understanding the form of an object. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and it was talking about cold and how to sort of deal with cold and how cold affects us. And it was really interesting because it's kind of similar to what's being stated here. Have you ever noticed like it can be a cold day and you sort of manage it, but as soon as the wind starts to blow, you feel colder? Do you know why that is? It's not that the wind's colder, it's the same temperature, but they have what they call the chill factor. Huh? The what? Not really. It's like, you know how you have all this like cilia? You know what cilia is? All this like fine hair on your body? So that captures a layer of air around the body. And when the wind blows, it disturbs that layer of air. And that layer of air functions as insulation. It's just like when you get, like the best way to stay warm is to layer up with lots of layers of clothes, because these layers, they capture the air, and the air functions as insulation around the body. So when the wind blows, it blows away that insulation. I thought that was really interesting, how Krishna's designed this material body, and how it functions, you know, how just this thin layer of hair on the body captures the air and enables you to stay warmer. So here we see that Kapila Deva is explaining about the form. And it's got an interesting progression. I just want to sort of touch a little bit on this progression that Kapila Deva has gone through. So we see in the beginning, he starts with sound, the first element he describes in this section, basically beginning about verse 33, I think. And he's talking about how the ego, because he talks about the ego and how the ego, is affected by the different modes of nature, goodness, passion, and ignorance. And he says ego and ignorance generates sound when it's agitated by the sixth energy of the Lord. And sound conveys the idea of an object, indicates the presence of the speaker. Just say, it's a, this indicating the presence of a speaker. Prabhupada tells different stories. There was one king of Jaipur who was Man Singh, I think it was. And he was able to, he had this, Arjuna had the same ability, where he could hear, so he didn't have to see the person he was trying to shoot. He could just hear them, and he knew where they were, and he could shoot them. So this Emperor Man Singh, he also had this same ability. He could blindfolded, he could actually shoot someone, just by sound. So the sound indicates where the person is. And it's the subtle form of ether. And the auditory sense, obviously, is the ear. And we see, as will be described later on in this chapter, how with the universal form, the Virat Rupa, first he'll manifest the ears, and then the sound will manifest. So you can see the connection between all these different things in the Lord himself. And then from after sound comes touch, as manifest. And what's happening is, due to the influence of time, this is described in the Brahma Samhita also, how first off you have the pradhan. Pradhan is like the non-conglomerate elements. It's just all like merged. You can't, not really merged, but it's all sort of mixed up in one, sometimes called the primordial soup. And it's all kind of mixed together. You can't actually distinguish anything there. You can't distinguish the different elements, subtle or gross, and neither can you distinguish any actions or anything like that. It's just all the primordial ingredients for the material nature. And then what happens is, as described in the Brahma Samhita, is the Ichcha Shakti and the Kala Shakti, they enter into the pradhan. So the Ichcha Shakti is the desire, and not the desire of the Lord, it's actually the desire of the living entity that stirs all this into motion, because the living entity has this intention to enjoy. They want to enjoy matter, they want to exploit matter, as Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita, how the living entities want to exploit the resources of the material nature. And this desire to enjoy, along with the time factor. The time factor is Krishna manifesting. We have the desire of the living entity, and Krishna manifests as a time factor. As soon as that time factor is introduced, then the pradhan stirs into motion, and then it transforms into Mahatattva. And from the Mahatattva, these 20, sometimes 24, sometimes 25 elements are being manifest. So then the touch manifests, and air, as I was just saying, the air you can't feel, but when it starts to move, you can feel it. So with the invisible elements, you can feel them in certain circumstances. And also, after touch manifests, then air and the sense of touch become manifest. And and touch, you have like hardness, or you feel some fabric softness, heat and cold. This is how touch manifests. How touch is experienced is through these different sort of extremes, if you like. And they're like the distinguishing attributes of touch. And touch is like the subtle form of air, if you like, because it's only through touch you can perceive air. And of course, what is the sense of touch? Does anyone know? Which one of our senses is related to touch? Huh? Skin, yeah. It's actually considered to be the largest organ in the body, is the skin. So through the skin you can perceive all these different things. And then, as I say, air manifests, and air's action is exhibited in movements and mixing, like air will mix with certain fragrances and carry the fragrances to your nostrils, things like that. It allows sound, sound travels in the air, actually travels in the ether, which is in between the air elements, but it travels in the air. And then also other sense perceptions. And a really interesting thing about air, it enables the proper functioning of all the senses and all the organs in the body, because if the air is disturbed, then then you find that actually a lot of illnesses come about. And one of the prime things they do in Ayurveda is they look at the air and try, when they're feeling the pulses, they're feeling the different what they call it, the different kapha, pitta, vayu in the body. But one of the most important ones is air. So if the air is disturbed, then it's very difficult to have good health. And then form manifests, and by the interaction of air and the sense of touch, one perceives different forms. And then form evolves to manifest fire and colour. And this is what we're talking about here, is fire. And forms, characteristics are understood by dimension, quality and individuality. And you'll see, you see something, you can perceive it, oh, it's about this big. It's of this quality. It has these characteristics, just like, this is metal. So metal's cold, it's hard. This one's smooth. So you can see all the different characteristics that are there. And the form, and this is something that's really interesting, the form of fire is appreciated by its effulgence. Just like you'll see, I remember when I was younger, we did metallurgy at school, and well, not really metallurgy, but sort of metalwork. But part of it was learning a bit of metallurgy, and part of that is you look at different metals and what temperature they melt at, and you can tell the temperature of fire by looking at it. Like if it's like orange, it's cooler. If it's yellow, it's hotter. If it's white, it's really hot. You hear the term white hot. And also with the fire, especially when you use things like oxyacetylene torches, you'll see there's like, in the middle there's like this, the flame, in the middle of the flame there's like this white flame, and the tip of that white flame is the hottest point, and you'll have layers of different colours outside, eventually going to blue, which is not as hot. But just by the effulgence of fire, you can understand fire, you can understand how hot it is. And it's quite interesting because the effulgence of fire is actually very, very attractive. I remember Gopal one time, we were sitting here in the temple in the morning, and the fire was going, and we were sitting near the fire, and he said, this is actually more interesting than television. And it's like that fire is actually very, very attractive. And of course, fire is also very, very destructive if you're not careful with fire. And there's actually, I saw a headline yesterday, there was a fire in some ski resort where the whole place was destroyed and people were killed and stuff, so it's very, very dangerous if it's not handled properly. And of course, the sense that's related to form is the eyes. Through the eyes you perceive the form. And then fire, as we'll see in the next verse, is appreciated by light, its ability to cook, to digest, to destroy, cold, to evaporate, and to give rise to hunger, thirst, eating, and drinking. And it's just like one thing you can, if you look at the Ayurvedic perception of the body, one thing you can understand is like it's kind of a natural thing to have thirst, but if you don't have thirst, it indicates that your fire of digestion is weak. But when one has thirst, that indicating the fire of digestion is stronger. So, and especially without this fire of digestion, there's no hunger and thirst. And then taste manifests, then water. From taste, water comes. And Krishna, as Krishna says in the Gita, of the taste in water, you can see in the Gita how Krishna is drawing the connection between these things. And it has many different characteristics: moistening other subjects, coagulating various mixtures, causing satisfaction, maintaining life, softening things, driving away heat, incessantly supplying itself to reservoirs of water, and refreshing. There's an interesting story in the first canto when Narad Muni was explaining to Vyasadeva how he achieved realization. And he mentions about how he had served these Mahabharata devotees for some time, and they bestowed his mercy upon him. Then after his mother had passed away, and the Mahabharats, because they stayed in one place for the period of Chaturmasya, for 4 months of Chaturmasya, and after they moved on, he also set about his quest to find God. And he travelled for a long time, and he was feeling quite exhausted and tired, etc. And then he came upon a body of water, and it describes how when he touched that body of water, he felt completely refreshed. So he entered into the water, he bathed, and he felt refreshed. And then he sat down and meditated. So we see this is also a quality of water. And water is actually a very, very amazing element. It's like when you take a powder, you mix water with the powder, what happens? Does it increase or decrease in volume? Decreases. When you mix water with something, it's just phenomenal what happens. Water is a really unique element. And someone was telling me some aspects of water the other day. It's like, apparently, I haven't tried this out experimentally, but apparently, when you freeze water and it becomes ice, what happens to it? It becomes lighter. Figure that one out. You were telling me that, that's right. It's the only element that becomes lighter when you freeze it. Yeah, H2O, yeah, it's two of the lighter, like hydrogen's number 1 and oxygen's number 8 on the periodic table. So it's quite an extraordinary element. But then the interesting discussion here is, at least I find the interesting discussion here. Actually, there's a few more. Then he displays smell, yeah, and when water interacts with taste, the odor comes about. And you'll see what happens with water. Whatever you mix it with, it'll take on that odor. And although the odor originally comes from earth in various ways, when it's mixed with something that's horrible smell, it takes on horrible smell. When it's mixed with something that's really nice smell, mild, strong, acidic, whatever, it'll take on the proportions of those substances. And obviously smell through the nose. Then earth, many characteristics. We can make forms of the Lord with earth, we construct places of residence, we can prepare water pots. And earth is the place of sustenance for all elements. This is Kapila Deva will describe this a little bit later. And we see like the earth supports everyone. And there's actually an interesting prayer when you're doing deity worship. We establish the asanas called asana stapana, and you actually pray to the earth to support you, to sustain you during the worship. And so this is the position of the earth. But then it's really interesting because this chapter, actually if we go back the previous chapter 25, and the 9 chapters is the second of 9 chapters, are Kapila Deva's instructions to Devahuti. And in the first chapter he's talking about the process of devotional service, but now he's talking about all these elements, the aspects of material nature. It's going into great detail, and one might question, how is it that this, what's this Sankhya got to do with devotional service? And if we look, there's a few interesting points we can look at. One is like, if you look at Bhagavad Gita 239 in the purport, Prabhupada explains that Lord Krishna's Sankhya and Lord Kapili's Sankhya, as described in the Bhagavatam, are one and the same. They are all Bhakti Yoga. There's no difference, because in 239, Krishna is explaining Sankhya. Lord Krishna therefore said that only less intelligent class of men make a distinction between Sankhya Yoga and Bhakti Yoga. And then we see here, actually the previous chapter, in verse 20, in the previous chapter, Lord Kapila Deva describes Sankhya as the heart of Bhakti, which is, the verse is a very interesting verse of purport. So he's describing how through this detailed knowledge of material nature, one can actually understand the self. And also one can see the self as the servant of Krishna. And this is the point of this whole description, because also there's another verse that he describes. I'll give it a second. So the point of Sankhya is to equip us with knowledge. Because once we have this knowledge, we can actually understand the material nature. We can understand how we're meant to function as material nature. Because this is the point. It's like most people, when they come to this material world, their intention or their desire is to try to enjoy material nature, because it's here for me to lord over, it's here for my enjoyment, it's here for me to control and to possess. But someone who has knowledge, who actually understands the truth about this material world, realizes the point of the material nature. The material nature is here to serve Krishna, is not here to serve me. But if we use the material nature for Krishna's pleasure, then we have all the facilities of the material nature, we have all the capacity to enjoy the material nature through using it to serve Krishna. And that's, I remember years ago, Krishna Chaitanya Maharaj explained to me this idea of the Sambandha triangle. So you have three things. You have Ishvara, Jiva, Prakriti. And you know, the Ishvara has his nature, the Jiva has their nature, the Prakriti has its nature. And you know, obviously Krishna's supreme controller, he's the supreme enjoyer, Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchidananda Vigraha, Radhe Radhe Govinda Savakarana Karana. He's the source of everything, he's the cause of all. He has no origin. We see in the 5th chapter of the Gita, he says that, you know, I'm the supreme enjoyer, I'm the supreme proprietor, and I'm the only friend. So there's so many wonderful descriptions of Krishna's nature, so we understand Krishna's nature. But then, but some people are confused about that also. Some people might see God as being my order supplier, or maybe God is imaginary, or God's just, you know, like we're all God. That's quite a common thing. Is many people think we, you know, by practicing some, you know, chanting some mantra or practicing some yoga system, that I can become God. So this is also a misunderstanding. And then if you look at the Prakriti or the Jiva, what's the Jiva's position? Some people, you know, as we see it's described in the 16th chapter, the 14th chapter, Gita. Some people see the Jiva as the enjoyer. Some people see the Jiva as the controller, as the proprietor. But as Krishna explains in the 5th chapter of the Gita again, that if you understand his position, Gyatmam Shantim Richati, you can actually attain peace. But if you don't understand his position, you can't have peace because you're bewildered. You think that's you. You think that you're the controller, you're the enjoyer, you're the proprietor. And in this position, you're always going to be harassed by the material nature. So, if we understand Krishna's position, we understand the Jiva's position, and then what is the Prakriti's position? Again, you know, people who are bewildered, they're looking at the Prakriti as my means of enjoyment, my means of satisfaction in this material world. But actually, as Krishna says in the 10th chapter, he says, Aham savasha prava savarnavatati iti matmajantamam buddhavavasam. That I am the source of all spiritual material nature. Everything emanates from me. And the wise perfectly know this. They engage in my service and worship me with all their hearts. But what do they engage in Krishna's service? They engage the Prakriti in Krishna's service. So this is the concept of this relationship triangle, is we understand the relationship between these three items, the Ishvara, the Jiva, and the Prakriti. Someone who views the Prakriti as my means of enjoyment in this material world will be confused about not only the Prakriti, but also about themselves and also about Krishna. They'll have no idea of God. They'll think God is something different. But if we understand Krishna's position, if we understand our own position, and if we understand the position of the Prakriti, then we know how to function in this material world. And we become, as Krishna is saying, Gyatmam Shantim Richati. We become peaceful in this material world. And this is the key to progressing in Krishna consciousness. And there's a really interesting verse here. I'll just see if I can find it. I took note of it in the previous chapter. You're probably familiar with that verse. I think it's at the end of the 4th chapter. Tasmavigana Sampadam Richnavigana Chitvainam Samsa Chitvainam Samsa Atitoshisa Bharaka. So Krishna is saying to Arjuna, armed with knowledge. He says, therefore the doubts that was originally a heart of ignorance should be destroyed with the weapon of knowledge. Therefore, armed with knowledge, stand and fight. So Arjuna is bewildered about his duty. because of material attachment, because he's attached to the material world. Now, we'll say, oh, you should give up attachment, but who can give up attachment? Yeah, we've all got attachment. It's a function of having a material, being a living entity, basically. Is there some sort of attachment? But Krishna's directing him to, take up this knowledge, because chapter 4, as we understand, is transcendental knowledge. At the end of this explanation of transcendental knowledge, he's telling Arjuna to fight, but not fight for some material, purpose. Not fight because Duryodhana's offended him, or Duryodhana's usurping the throne, or anything like that. But fight because I want you to. Fight because I'm the Supreme Personality of Godhead, you're my servant, and the duty of the servant is to serve the Master. So fight based on knowledge. Then we see here in the previous chapter, in verse 20, Kapila Dev makes a really, he sort of builds on that point really, and makes a really, really interesting statement. He reinforces the statement of Krishna, and then he goes further by explaining not to abandon attachment, just redirect your attachment. Instead of, because who's ever tried to give up an attachment? Were you successful? Can't be successful. You can't give up attachment. It's not possible. And what does Krishna say? I think it's in the second chapter. It says, but ceasing such engagement by experiencing a higher taste, what happens? We become fixed in consciousness. So the point is, we all have attachment. We cannot give it up. It's intrinsic to the self. We cannot give up attachment. We just have to redirect that attachment. So, and that's the point that Kapila Dev makes in verse 20. I'll just read it because it's a really interesting verse. And initially it's a little bit difficult to understand, but every learned man knows very well that attachment for the material is the greatest entanglement of the spirit soul. We all accept that, isn't it? If we become attached to material nature, we just become entangled in this material world. And it's so difficult to extricate ourselves. It's so difficult to find a way out of this. But then Kapila goes on, but that same attachment, when applied to the self-realized devotees, opens the door of liberation. So if we're taking this attachment that we have, instead of being attached to the elements of this material world, using the elements of this material world in Krishna's service, and through that process of bhakti, through that process of utilizing matter to serve Krishna, we develop our attachment for Krishna. This is the way it works. It is by using this. There's that statement in the scriptures where it's saying, say for instance you develop jaundice or something, through too much milk product. When you take the same thing and use it therapeutically, it actually cures the disease. Just like sometimes, I'm sure somebody had dysentery in India. I remember having a really, really severe dose of dysentery a few years back. And what they, and usually dysentery comes from too many milk products. Like when you go to Vrindavan, you get into the milk sweets, you get into all this different type of stuff. There's so many nice milk products there, but it causes dysentery. And usually the thing they recommend you take is, what is it? Isabgol and yoga. Like pea seed powder, I think we call it psyllium husks here. Very distasteful stuff. They're always trying to find ways to make it a little bit more palatable with sugar and stuff, which actually makes things worse. But so the Bhagavatam declares that that when you take the thing, like something will cause a disease, but when you take that same thing therapeutically, it'll cure the disease. So attachment is not really the problem. It's what we're attached to is the problem. Because Srila Prabhupada would often say, Krishna consciousness means to take the I out of the center and put Krishna in the center. That's all you have to change, is change what your center is. Not that I become the center of everything, that I am the center of everything, but Krishna is the center of everything. And this is the practice of Krishna consciousness. This is how we become God conscious. It's just by centering whatever it is we're doing around Krishna. Krishna says this in the Gita, what's that verse? Yad karoshi, yadasdashi, yadjaroshi, yadja. Yata pashashi kuteya, tad kurusha marapanam. He says, whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever you offer, give it away, whatever austerities you perform, you do that as son of Kunti as an offering to me. And then he says, Suva Suva Hare Vamokshate Kambandana Sanyasana Yoga Vimukha. He says, with your mind fixed on me this principle of liberation, I said, in this way you'll overcome the reactions to all auspicious and inauspicious activities, and with your mind fixed on me in this principle of renunciation, you'll be liberated and that shall come to me. And then he quotes that verse, Patram Pusham Param Toyam Yoma Bhakti Payachati, that if you offer with love and devotion, a leaf, a flower, fruit, or water, I'll accept. So Krishna explains very wonderfully in the 9th chapter how that whatever we have, whatever we're dealing with in this material world, just use it for his service. And that way we become liberated from the effects of this material nature. It's not like it's rocket science or something very, very complicated. It's quite simple. But because of lack of sincerity, because of lack of faith, we don't really make the commitment. And this is where we have to work on it. It's just, I was just reflecting on yesterday how sometimes you hear younger devotees, not often, sometimes you hear younger devotees saying how they're engaged in devotional service 24 hours a day. And I kind of like muse on that a little bit. I think that's kind of an interesting thing. But really, what does it mean to be engaged in devotional service 24 hours a day? This is the residents of Vrindavan. They're 24 hours a day engaged in Krishna service. They cannot help but think of Krishna. Everything they do is focused around Krishna. They're eating, sleeping, whatever they do, it's just based around Krishna. So our goal, obviously, is to be engaged 24 hours a day in Krishna service. And we see there are devotees, for sure, in ISKCON that are 24 hours a day engaged in Krishna service. But these are very, very advanced devotees. Because to overcome the influence of the material nature, overcome the influence of the mind and the senses, and just to be exclusively serving Krishna is quite an achievement. But this is what Kapila Dev is pushing us to do here, by understanding material nature, by understanding it's nothing but Krishna's energy, and this is how he manifests it. This is going to help us to overcome the influence of it through knowledge, and then just to use this energy in his service. And then in this way, we become peaceful, this way we become happy in this material world, because we're no longer being afflicted or controlled by the material nature. Okay, I finished there. Is there any questions at all, or any comments? Yes, Padma.
Hare Krishna. Thank you for a very nice class, Prabhu. I have a quick comment and a quick question about the elements, if that's all right. So the first comment is that I've read that out of all of the elements here on earth, the one that is the most powerful in terms of, what we call adidaivik, in terms of natural disaster, that's actually water. Water is the one that causes, or can cause the most devastation, out of all of the types of natural disasters. So I thought that was quite interesting.
Yeah, it's because when you have fire, everything's gone. When you have a flood, it makes a hell of a mess. Just remember, what year was that we lost the car? Was that 2019? I think, or 2022, whatever. I remember driving down we had a car was parked in South Mooloolaba there, and got flooded. But I just remember, because I was overseas and my wife was in Brisbane at the time, and I remember driving down Tweed Valley Way and seeing all the stuff piled up on the side of the road. It was just like a war zone. It was really, really, wow. It was like Mooloolaba was really hit, especially South Mooloolaba was really hit by that. When there's a fire, because I used to live down in Victoria in a place called Lara, and Lara is a real bushfire zone. And when the fires come through, everything's just destroyed. Water's pretty damaging. But the most powerful of the elements, you know what the most powerful of the elements is? Sound.
Well, I think it's
sound.
Sorry?
Sound is the most
Sound,
powerful
yeah.
element. Amanapati Shabda, everything comes from sound.
Yeah. I think what I read was they were assessing it according to natural disasters.
I got
and
the
probably
point.
impact in terms of deaths.
No, I got the
stuff
point of
like
that. Yeah, I got the point of that.
Okay, so can I ask you my quick question about the elements? So is it true that out of all of the 5, whatever it is, main elements, that fire is the purest? And if so, why?
Yeah, I don't know the answer. I haven't read that fire is the purest. But, anything in this material world is contaminated. Even the water. I mean, where do you find pure water? And actually, I was talking to a chap the other day, and he's really kind of into microplastics and how microplastics pervade everything. And so we see even like our drinking water is just contaminated. And also like water, especially rainwater, because we're thinking rainwater is pure, but where does rainwater come from? Not the material sense, the spiritual sense. Where does rainwater come from?
Rainwater.
Yeah, where does rain come from?
Well, it's said that all the water in the world is just circulated around and around.
No, it's coming from the semen of the Lord. From the semen of the universal form. Therefore, it's influenced by passion. So it's not pure. Even when it comes from a cloud, we're thinking it's pure. And therefore we see that you don't use rainwater in deity worship because it's not considered pure.
Golmuk.
Huh?
Golmuk. Golmuk, the source
Well, I don't know if you'll be offering
and
Krishna
Ganga.
glasses.
It's also the Ganga, Golmuk.
Yeah. But, so you don't use rainwater. If you let it sit for 10 days, Sri Goswami says it's okay, but generally you won't use rainwater in deity worship because it's not pure.
Thank you very
None of
much.
the elements are pure, as far as I know. Ram Prasad.
It's interesting, they purify water to use to wash mobile phone screens and things like that. And they purify it to such an extent, there's no chemicals left in it whatsoever. You can't drink it. You cannot drink it. It's so pure. It will rob the elements out of your body that you need to absorb. So we have to have elements within the water for us to be able to absorb it.
Yeah, and for it to be beneficial to us as well. But I noticed like in London, they have these guys that they go around cleaning the windows, and they've got this machine, and the idea with it, because the water in London is really hard, a lot of heavy salts and stuff in it, so they've got this machine that takes all that out of the water, and they wash the windows, and it doesn't leave any marks on the windows. They just use a brush to wash the windows. They don't need to use a window wipe or anything like that, a squeegee.
Hare Krishna. You mentioned that water is lighter when it's frozen. So my question is, the human body has like 70% water. So when you're carrying a baby that's asleep, it's heavier than when it's awake. Would you answer that one?
I've noticed that myself. It's like not a baby, but just a person. I remember one time we were in St. Petersburg, and one of the young ladies, she passed out on a train, and so they asked me to carry her off the train, and it was just like, oh my God, it was so hard to carry her. It was like, like she weighed 200 kilograms. I have read in the Bhagavatam why that is, but I can't remember. I think it's because there's something, it's about the soul. It's not to do with it, because like you'll see, like when the soul's in the body floats. When the soul leaves the body sinks. The effect of the soul is diminished, because the soul's not so prominent. So I mean, it just really shows us the extraordinary kind of features of this material nature, especially the subtle aspects of it. because we're all thinking it's just understood by science and stuff like that. But when you see things like water, how it becomes lighter, how it, when it's frozen, and how the body seemingly becomes heavier when the soul's not so present in terms of consciousness and stuff like that. How do you explain that scientifically? So there's much more to this world than what meets the eye.
That reminds me of another question. So to think of Krishna all the time, I was thinking that we have to utilize the culture of Krishna consciousness, or the Vedic culture. So that could lead into the subtleness of why we need our right hand, but all these subtle things more, and that reminds us of Krishna. I don't know, I'm just thinking, how do we remind ourselves of Krishna more? Is it the culture of Krishna?
There's an interesting verse from the Padma Purana that says, Smata Vyasatam Vishnu, Vishmatavya Vajatachit, Sarva Vidya Sedesha, Ekagore Kinkaram. So there's two principles in devotional service. We always remember Krishna, we never forget him. All the rules and regulations, that they are servants of this principle. So, the reason we follow the do's, do this, do that, chant, japa, do whatever, is so you remember Krishna. The reason we observe the restrictions is so we don't forget Krishna. Just like you take intoxication as a sex game. You don't remember Krishna when you're doing those things. So the whole point of the rules and regulations, especially one who's at the stage of Vaidhi Bhakti, because you see, as we evolve in the devotional process, the way we practice evolves. So for someone who's very, very advanced, they're always remembering Krishna. The rules, Prabhupada will talk about this, the rules are not so relevant for someone who's a Nityasiddha. They still follow them to set an example, but they're not so relevant because always remember Krishna. But for those in our situation, at least my situation, we follow the rules and regulations to achieve this goal of always remembering Krishna and never forgetting him. Okay? Thank you very much, Srila Prabhupada Ki. Samaveta Bhakti Vrinda.